Russia has violated Lithuanian airspace with drones. Trump and Zelensky had a call, and Brazil is heading a BRICS response to U.S. tariffs. I am Mandatory Fun Day. This is Worldwide Wednesday. Here's everything you need to know in a couple minutes. Lithuania confirmed that a Russian drone carrying explosives crossed its airspace and crashed near a military installation. The explosive device was safely located and destroyed by local forces. Lithuania requested an immediate NATO response, specifically with air defense support to reinforce its eastern frontier. This is crazy. Russia is very likely to say that this was some sort of accident, maybe a training accident or, an errant drone that was supposed to be, used against Ukraine. It went off the track, whatever, a pilot that made a mistake. But these are the types of mistakes that cannot happen, especially when you're talking about a drone that has an explosive attached to it. The chance of collateral or civilian casualties or damage is extremely high, obviously, and countries are supposed to have extreme accountability of this type of equipment. I can't speak to other NATO militaries or really many other militaries, their internal policy on how to manage this kind of stuff. But in the US military, which I have been a member of for almost a decade and a half, it's not that mistakes never happen, but it is so stringent anytime you have any kind of explosive or incendiary, the policy surrounding it is so stringent, it mitigates the risk of mistakes like this happening. What this was potentially was Russia testing boundaries, seeing what NATO countries or Lithuania are going to do in response to something like this happening, seeing how they are defended, what their response is. I think that is just as likely as this being a mistake. The Netherlands committed €500 million through NATO's new PURL mechanism to buy US-made military hardware for Ukraine. The package includes Patriot missile system components, which is very, very significant, and the NATO Secretary General urged allied nations to follow suit. The Netherlands is kind of putting their money where their mouth is with this move. The US Patriot missile system is world-renowned for what it does, and the two big things that Ukraine wants right now is to protect ground forces and high-value assets from things like missiles and drones, which the Patriot system does exceptionally well. The placement of that system in the hands of Ukraine by any country, but especially procuring that system from the US, it's a huge move. The video is not over, but you can check out themandatoryfunday.com if you want to support me further. You can get some merch. There's also a members section. In that section, you can get 20% off merchandise purchases and access to exclusive content you're only going to see there. We also have regulation compliant shirts. There's a link for that on the website. Thank you to everybody who sent me challenge coins or patches. If you want to send me one, my P.O. box is on the website, and I will proudly display whatever you send me until everything's full. And then I'll probably just, I don't know. I don't even know what I'll do with it at that point. I'll make like a suit of armor out of challenge coins. I don't know. We'll see. Let's get back to the video. Sweden, Norway, and Denmark are collectively contributing approximately $500 million US worth of US sourced defensive weaponry, including air defense systems for Ukraine. NATO is coordinating the logistics of the deliveries, and they are expected to arrive sometime in September. This is part of a broader NATO-led effort to supply Ukraine with urgent battlefield needs, specifically air defense. Air defense is massive in this conflict, with the prevalence of drones and also with Russia's prevalence of using, any kind of artillery, really. Air defense systems are a must. Air defense systems are complex, they are not cheap, and they take some significant training to use. So when you're talking about a country getting these systems, it's not as simple as getting them there and flipping them on. You have to train people on how to use them. You have to train people on how to maintain them. What might seem like, it's going to take a month to ship there may actually be a 6 to 12 month long process until the system is being fully utilized to its maximum capability. All members of NATO in a recent summit agreed to reach an annual 5% of GDP defense spending by 2035. 3.5% is directed towards core military operations, and 1.5% is towards resilience and infrastructure. Progress will be reviewed in 2029, and a national roadmap is due by mid-2026. This is huge because it shows a unified NATO, which is exactly what NATO wants right now, with as many contentious and hot situations with adversary countries as there are around the world, and with as many conflicts or potential conflicts that are either happening or on the horizon. The increase to 5% in defense spending is extremely aggressive. But not only that, the fact that the progress on that defense spending will be reviewed within the next couple years, and a roadmap to get there is due by next year, that is extremely aggressive. It really doesn't get more aggressive than that. Many countries have historically struggled to meet what NATO has outlined as the minimum defense spending. Many countries in NATO also spend significant amounts of money on social safety nets and that type of thing. And so that money has to come from somewhere. They're going to have to do a little moving around of the budget. Then you're talking about issues internally. How are the populaces of these countries going to respond to this increased defense spending, especially given that many of these NATO nations aren't necessarily at risk from like Russian or Chinese aggression? It'll be really interesting to see how this all shakes out. US President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky declared post-talks that this war must come to a close. They had a call, and they say it was productive. Not just productive, highly productive. Despite this, secondary US sanctions on Russia will proceed as scheduled. European leaders have also joined and seen some consensus on the urgency of ending the conflict. Russia has, for a significant period of time now, tried to insulate itself against sanctions. It wants to be able to operate independent of any other nation. They've made a move towards isolationism. It'll be interesting to see if anything that they've done in recent months is going to help them with that. Or will the US sanctions have full effect? Getting into the BRICS nations, the US raised tariffs on Indian and Brazilian imports to 50%, citing their continued purchase of Russian oil. This is a punitive move, and it's increasing pressure on BRICS to coordinate responses. There have been multiple countries that have kind of coordinated and talked about how to react to this. It appears that Brazil is kind of leading the front on any kind of BRICS response to US tariffs. BRICS very much wants the de-dollarization of the world. The United States currency has been the primary currency used for trade for a very long time. BRICS doesn't want it that way anymore because it gives the US extreme financial leverage and power. There's two primary courses of action that countries can take when they're tariffed, right? When we're talking about BRICS, which is an organization of multiple countries, they can unify and then have a response, or they can buckle under the pressure. It looks like they're attempting to unify and have some sort of response, but we'll see how it works out. If they can't figure out what to do to coordinate, they're going to have to comply or face the pressure. The president of Brazil did state that they want to unify BRICS leaders and come up with some sort of response. This could look like reinforcing multilateral trade. If BRICS countries are trading with one another and they can cut the US out of that, that's really advantageous for them. It takes the bite out of US tariffs. If they're not trading with the US, then the tariffs don't matter. This is also really concerning because international trade, in my opinion, has kept us out of some significant conflicts over the last couple decades especially. Countries relying on one another through trade, having some kind of financial reliance on one another, even if it's like indirect, like trade is. You know, it's not countries saying, we're not going to do something because you're paying for X or what. It's countries trading with each other, trading goods, making money. This is the kind of stuff that keeps us out of conflicts. If countries or organizations of adversarial countries start insulating themselves against that, it opens the possibility for military conflict. There's nothing keeping them from firing some shots. The US has been putting incredible pressure on many nations around the world through tariffs, which, good or bad, I don't think we can really say yet. We got to wait and see how everything plays out. Despite their competition geopolitically, India and China have found some common ground in defying the US. Specifically defying the US and their sanctions by continuing to purchase and import discounted Russian oil. This is obviously a massive support for Russia in its ongoing war with Ukraine. This is definitely a reflection of a shared stance on energy sovereignty. They want to move away from Western economic structures, specifically the US. Every country in BRICS is doing what they can to limit the US economically. The US has been an economic powerhouse for many years at this point, and they want to change that. This move has as much punch economically as it does symbolically, though. Symbolically, this is massive. It's countries directly defying the US and what the US has stated. The US has said, hey, you're going to face sanctions if you continue to purchase Russian oil. And these countries are saying, we don't care. Russia has labeled US tariffs as a neo-colonial agenda, stating that the US wants to preserve its global dominance. The statement lauded emerging unity among BRICS and the global South as a counterbalance. Feels like Russia's kind of just stating the obvious here. Every nation wants to be dominant. The US has held a place of financial dominance at this point for many years. But it does seem like they're trying to give BRICS a little plug here. They're saying like, hey, we have better options or different options. Who knows? Some of the things that came out of the most recent BRICS summit was local currency trade and reducing reliance on the US dollar. I've mentioned this in other ways throughout the video, but reducing reliance on the US dollar seems to be what BRICS is most focused on, at least in the short term. It'll be interesting to see how things play out with Russia and China specifically, because I just can't imagine if BRICS takes over as the financial powerhouse of the world, that one of those two nations is not going to try and kind of get to the top of that. It is hard for me to believe that BRICS is just going to remain this incredibly unified front after they take a position of, relative financial power. Thank you for watching this week's video. Please watch another one in the queue. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any of the updates. Thank you so much for supporting me, guys, and I will see you next time.